In Pokemon, there are countless examples of Pokemon who look amazing, but when put into practice are actually quite underwhelming. We covered a few of these examples like Goodra and Mega Mewtwo X in a previous video last year. There are also examples of Pokemon that Game Freak intentionally makes bad to keep the game balanced, like Archeops and Slaking, who are nerfed by their abilities. But what about when the opposite happens? What happens when a Pokemon that's supposed to be bad ends up actually being really good? Yes, just like the infamous Starly who can topple Arceus, there are some Pokemon that offer way more than just meets the eye. So good morning everybody, good morning, it's JPR, and here are some bad Pokemon that are secretly amazing. Route 1 Pokemon are oftentimes considered filler Pokemon, a topic I touched on in another recent video. Almost always they are mono-normal type, might only be useful for a gym or two, and then are quickly forgotten about as soon as better Pokemon become available. And in the Unova region, this actually applies to two Route 1 Pokemon, Patrat and Lillipup. Patrat we already know evolves into Watchog, and eventually turns into one of the Unova region's worst Pokemon as we previously learned in that series. And while you'd expect Lillipup to meet a similar fate, well, it kinda does. Ask any competitive player and they'd tell you that Stoutland has had a negligible impact on the game. In singles, it has always been confined to the PU tier, where only the most useless Pokemon in the game reside. And in VGC, I could only find a single documented case in 2017 where Stoutland actually put in work, where it surprisingly earned 4th place in an Italian regional. Aside from that though, Stoutland may as well be non-existent when it comes to online play. But thankfully, one niche does exist where Stoutland is the undisputed GOAT. And some of you quick thinkers may already know where I'm going with this. That's right, Stoutland is the undisputed champ of Pokemon Black and White speedruns. This is partially thanks to the fact that Lillipup is a Route 1 encounter, so you can start training it up right away, but there are many other factors that go into it as well. Lillipup comes equipped with Tackle right off the bat, which was at its absolute strongest in Gen 5 at 50 base power, making it a very strong normal stab option in the early game. Lillipup is also able to learn Work Up via TM as soon as you complete the first gym, making it very easy to set up and sweep entire teams. And as soon as you reach Nimbasa City, you receive the TM for Return, which maxes out at 102 base power, which is more than enough to carry Stoutland through the late game. In addition to this, Stoutland naturally learns Crunch and Reversal, which are perfect for dealing with all of Normal's usual counters, Rock, Steel, and Ghost. It's a very basic set, but it works perfectly for people looking to complete Black and White as fast as possible. And while Excadrill did end up stealing the crown in Black 2 and White 2 speedruns, for at least one game, Stoutland proved that sometimes David can topple Goliath. So it doesn't matter if Stoutland is a competitive no-show, its name will always be a part of Pokemon history, at least in one niche part of the community. But while Stoutland is an example of a Pokemon who is terrible online that works fantastically for the main story, the exact opposite can be said about Jumpluff. As I've gone over many times before, the grass type in Johto is in contention for maybe the worst type in any region ever. This region hates grass more than Quagsire does, and as a result, Jumpluff to this day remains one of Johto's least viable main story Pokemon. The only thing saving its public image is that it's from the same region as Meganium and Sunflora, so it's at least not that bad. But even outside of Johto, unless you just love Jumpluff that much, you're probably never going out of your way to use one in any region. Even in competitive singles, Jumpluff has consistently been one of the least used Pokemon since its introduction. But Jumpluff's true strength lies in VGC, in particular Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's many formats. See, Scarlet and Violet is the game where Sun is arguably stronger than it's ever been before. In this one game, we have Torkoal, Groudon, and Koraidon who all set up their own Sun just by switching in. Meanwhile, Jumpluff has always had access to the Chlorophyll ability, doubling its already impressive 110 base speed, giving this Pokemon virtually unparalleled speed control in the first turn. From there, it can quickly tip the scales in your favor with moves like Tailwind and Encore, and of course, the advent of Terastallization allows Jumpluff to abandon its relatively poor defensive typing for something more bulky like Poison, or Dark, which lets it counter Prankster Pokemon, who are normally the only things faster than a Jumpluff in the sunlight. It may have taken more than 22 years to get to this point, but Jumpluff has finally solidified itself as one of the best sun support Pokemon in the game, and it's pretty surreal to see. Speaking of Gen 2 Pokemon who are bad, boy, doesn't that narrow it down. This next Pokemon may as well be the poster child of this entire video, Smeargle. Smeargle is one of the OG gimmick Pokemon, and even Game Freak must have been aware of how underwhelming most players at the time would have found this thing, considering they tried their best to hide it in a few obscure patches of grass in the ruins of Alph. And that's because, for a main story playthrough, Smeargle just doesn't really work. Using Sketch to copy an NPC's moves, especially before the advent of double battles in Gen 3, really made it difficult to know exactly what you were getting. And even if you did get lucky and happened to sketch something like Spore or Sacred Fire, the odds of Smeargle doing anything worthwhile with it in-game are pretty slim, seeing as how it still has no way to overcome its abysmal stats. But as time passed and players realized that they could just, perfectly legitimately train their Smeargle in different ways, it became clear just how broken this Pokemon could be in a competitive context, especially once VGC doubles became the standard in Gen 4, as you could rely on a teammate to take the heat off Smeargle while it spams the game's most broken status moves. Dark Void, Belly Drum, Baton Pass. Most of these options ended up having to be banned at some point, whether it was singles or doubles. Smeargle may have been a joke when it first came out, but players quickly let Game Freak know just how potent this thing can be under the right conditions. But we've done a lot of talking about competitive play recently, so how about another popular fan format, Nuzlocking? Some Pokemon that you would normally skip right over in a regular playthrough become incredibly powerful options in a Nuzlocke. Take for instance, Jynx, a relatively hard to find Pokemon that feels like it adds very little to the game. But when you have virtually no Ice-type encounters across the Kanto or Johto regions, most Nuzlockers will be very pleased to add one of these things to their team. Whether it's in Johto's Ice Path right when Ice and Psychic hit their peak, or the incredibly early trade in Cerulean City that you can do in the Kanto games, Jynx is often regarded as a Pokemon that can carry entire Nuzlocke teams. In Gen 3, Jynx may not be around, but Shedinja is often regarded equally as high. While it's a high-risk, high-reward Pokemon, the inability that many boss trainers have to defeat it makes it a peak Nuzlocke Pokemon in the Hoenn region. Gen 5 Durant also functions somewhat similar to Jynx in Gen 2. It's a late-game encounter and is usually considered a pretty underwhelming Pokemon in most aspects, but it just so happens to be the easiest Pokemon to find in Unova's Victory Road, and boasts some amazing matchups against the Elite Four and Getsus. Living up to its name, this Pokemon truly comes in clutch when it matters most. Flamigo, a Pokemon that I'm sure most players normally pass on, happens to be incredible both in Nuzlockes and in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet speedruns. Its incredibly high stats and easy availability at the beginning of the game are what truly make this Pokemon incredible in the context of Paldea. I'm sure if it was placed anywhere near the end game, it wouldn't be considered nearly as good. But considering this guy can dang near drag your butt for the entire duration of the game is pretty impressive. Hey, it's me again. Just wanted to say that most of my viewers are not subscribed to the channel, and that kind of hurts my feelings, so I would really appreciate it if you did, especially if you're enjoying the video. Like, please. It would be awesome. Staying on track with Gen 9 Pokemon for a moment, one new Pokemon that I love for being designed around this archetype is Tatsugiri. Tatsugiri is actually more competent on its own than you'd think, but still far from the best water or dragon type that you'll find. In fact, if most players had to choose one for a playthrough or competitive singles, they'd likely pick up its partner in crime, Dondozo. But in VGC, Tatsugiri feels like one of the few Pokemon designed for the format that actually works well in the format, and has been a consistently popular Pokemon throughout almost all of Scarlet and Violet's formats. Sure, Dondozo still might be doing most of the battling, and Dondozo is still overall a more popular pick since it doesn't necessarily need Tatsugiri to be good, but I'd say it's a pretty rare instance of Game Freak actually successfully pulling off a gimmick Pokemon without it feeling horribly unbalanced one way or the other. Staying in the camp of normal types, let's take a look at a Gen 3 classic, Crawdaunt. Crawdaunt was pretty horrible when it first came around, being a physical attacker but having both of its types exclusively function as special. While Generation 4's physical special split considerably improved Crawdaunt, it still wasn't enough to overcome its rather poor stat balancing. But in Pokemon Black and White, Crawdaunt received a revolutionary buff in the form of its hidden ability, Adaptability, increasing the power of its water and dark type moves by another 50%. Finally, it could enjoy the perks of shredding through teams with simple moves like Aqua Jet or Knockoff, at least after it was buffed again in Gen 6. And because of that, Crawdaunt is simply one of the biggest examples of how hidden abilities take Pokemon that you'd normally never dare to use during the main story and turn them into ferocious post-game or competitive threats. Take for instance Ditto or Diggersby. These are Pokemon that you would never touch with a 10-foot pole in the main story. But as soon as hidden abilities became accessible, there's suddenly a niche for them in competitive play. This even applies to unlikely candidates like Cinderace, who would likely just be outclassed as an average fire-type sweeper if it only had access to Blaze. But add Libero to the complexion, and Cinderace is a completely different monster. Though sometimes a Pokemon doesn't even need an extra ability to be good. Let's throw it back to a pair of Gen 2 Steel types, Skarmory and Forretress. They're fine on their own, definitely not the worst Pokemon you could add to your team, but probably not the first ones you'd add either. But once again, the areas where these two really shine: competitive singles and Nuzlocke. Under these conditions, their steel typing and prevalence to defense make them far more valuable than they'd normally be when playing through the game. Throughout a main story playthrough, you'd think, why would I ever use Fortress? He gets like Gyro Ball and Bug Bite and there's nothing else to him. But in singles, Spikes, Stealth Rock, Explode, and it works way better than it has any right to. Skarmory is the exact same way. While he looks cool, using nothing but Steel Wing and Fly to deal damage is kind of a drag when playing the game the normal way. But in competitive play, it might just be one of the best aged Pokemon of all time with how it completely shuts down physical teams. Same thing for Nuzlocke, this guy is like the ultimate switch-in. 2 immunities, a massive defense stat, this is an amazing Pokemon on any team. So maybe at the end of the day, bad Pokemon is just a matter of perspective. Though I do find it quite funny that a lot of the formats we discussed throughout this video, like competitive singles, Nuzlocke, and speedrunning, were all fan-created ways to play the game. The only thing Game Freak really cares about is the main story and VGC, and it shows in the way that they balance the game. But through a little bit of creativity, the Pokemon fans themselves may have helped pull several dozen Pokemon from the bottom of the bin into the limelight. And that's really cool if you ask me. And I'm sure as time goes on and Pokemon fan formats keep emerging, that more and more Pokemon could be added to this list. Are there any that you think I missed? Be sure to let me know in the comment section down below. But don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I'll see you guys next time.